Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Jenny Aiello, and this is With Love, Jenny, a podcast where we meet ourselves right in the heart of our vulnerability and authenticity. In this sacred space where it's just you and I dive into real life, rich with wisdom and opportunities for deep healing. I explore what it means to truly connect to ourselves, to each other, and to something much greater than us all. In each podcast, I like to meet life right where it touches us most, in our tenderness, in our truth, in our struggles and our strength. So wherever you are on your journey, or whatever it is that you're carrying, no matter how light or heavy, just know I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of With Love, Jenny. My co-host, Kristen, who you are used to hearing on the podcast, isn't with us for now. She is taking a brief sabbatical, and I decided to use that as an opportunity to dive into some things that are more on a real personal level for me. And it kind of revealed itself as I was contemplating what to do when I'm flying solo. What will I talk about when I don't have a conversation going? And two things happened, and I want to share them because they opened up, kind of like opening up a secret door that behind it held all this rich wisdom and valuable information. And I'm going to share it with you in an upcoming series that is called Let Your Heart Be Seen. But I'm going to talk about how that all came about. The first thing that happened is that I was working with my coach, and one of the things that she asked me was, Jenny, what's the hardest thing that you've ever gone through? That question was almost like if you played 52 card pickup. It felt like she just did 52 card pickup, and all 52 cards were on the table, and they were all hard things. Each one their own story, each one their own challenge, each one carrying the energy of pain, grief, loss, helplessness, hopelessness. They all had a flavor, a different flavor. I really honestly could not pick just one because each story in that moment felt like the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And I don't know about you. I don't know if you're lucky enough to say, I can name it. It's just one thing. It was the hardest thing. For me, maybe I'm too sensitive. My mom always said, Jenny, you're too sensitive, because I feel deeply when people hurt or people I love are hurting. And I just feel a lot in the world. But I came up with the short list of those 52 card pickup game of what was the hardest thing in my life. I came up with 12 of them. Some have stories within them that makes up the other 40 cards in the deck. But I did narrow it down. And today I'm going to talk about those 12 areas in my life or in events in my life that I personally experienced and see if you have a version or something similar, or just hear and listen to things that I might be sharing that you know of someone else who might be sharing, and how you can be involved in their worst, hardest thing they've ever gone through. So all of that is what's showing up for me to begin with. And I want to preface this. It is not one big, long list of complaining and sad and depressing things, right? But they are real life. These are real life things that all of us, a lot of us will encounter all of them. And how do we handle them? How do we use those experiences to cope, to grow, to heal? They invite us in to the darkness when our heart breaks open and we have to feel really hard feelings. But we are invited in. And I can tell you that if you allow yourself to go into those places, into the the crevices of the broken heart that you carry, there's gifts inside. There's treasure. There are moments that when you do the work, you look back and say, that was the hardest thing I ever experienced, but I got the best growth, as much as I possibly could from it. It doesn't mean that whatever it was a good thing that happened, because bad things happen. But how we respond to them can make all the difference in how it defines you. How those hard moments define you, they help shape your perspective of life. They can help you become emotionally resilient. They can help you find courage you didn't know you had. They can deepen your faith. It's amazing, right? It's amazing what could come from it. So these stories are meant to become uplifting. Today, I'm just going to share with you my top 12 hardest things I've ever gone through. And then the following episodes that we're going to be going through, I'm going to dive deep and vulnerably into each one of those 12 topics to share the stories behind them and the hard decisions that had to be made and the growth that I had to have happen. Often it was a matter of life and death for me on some of these hard things. It was a matter of losing me or losing a relationship, and which one was I going to hold on to? So there's a lot that we're going to go into, a lot of introspection for you, a lot of life, whether you're in it or it's behind you or you're anticipating it. This is something that you will learn from. And I hope that even if it doesn't pertain to you, you might know someone that it would help, or it might help you know how to help them. Because I can tell you in each and every one of these situations, I had this kind of support that helped me grow and not get stuck in the pain. I had enormous resources that allowed me to walk through the hard parts and guided me, or put the light in front of me so I could find my way through the dark. But I also had people who used that opportunity to be right about things that they really knew nothing about. And their opinions or their judgments or even their advice was very harmful. And I had to learn discernment. And I think that as listeners out there, you probably have had a situation in your life where you had to discern between the good support and the damaging support. People offered their help in packages that were nicely wrapped and very toxic. So we're going to talk about all of this in upcoming episodes. So I'm glad you're here. I'm Jenny, and this is With Love, Jenny, and let's dive in. Okay, number one, these are not in any matter of this was the hardest thing I ever went through. Like I said, each one of these, if you ask me, I would say at the time, this is the hardest thing I've ever gone through. But they are in a bit of a chronological order of my life, how they unfolded. So first, I have to share that unlike most of my clients where we go in and do inner child work, right? And in the inner child work, I have some clients that learn to survive because of the horrible situation they found themselves in as a child. They developed severe anxiety. They had PTSD. They have minimal coping mechanisms when triggered. They have attachments. They have patterns where they know they're unhealthy, but they're familiar. So we spend a lot of time diving into all of that. And I want to say that I've done my inner child work. I still probably have plenty left to do. But I think, honestly, I lived in a bubble most of my childhood. Until I left for college, there was very little that I was exposed to that really stuck with me as the hardest thing I ever had to go through. Most of my childhood, even the hard parts, were funny stories that happened. When I got in trouble one day or something that happened and I thought it was horrible. It really wasn't. I'm talking about more of the hardest things you've had to do since becoming an adult. And one of my earliest episodes, getting my first marriage, I dated the part of our senior year in high school. We dated all through college, got married after we graduated, soon had 2 children, 18 months apart. And I really thought life was golden. I was happy. I had my little family. Everything was going as planned. And I really did think at 22, when I got married, I saw my life planned out exactly how it was going to go. And that was my first mistake, was thinking that because I could see the plan was going to be what I lived. And that didn't happen. I was devastated in my first marriage as things began to unravel. And they unraveled in a particularly vulnerable time for me. And I had nothing that I could reach for and hold on to. I didn't even know how to hold on to myself. I didn't know who I was at that point. The codependency was so bad on my part that I had lost the pillars and the foundation that I stood on and didn't know that I let get eroded out from under me. So going through a divorce was the hardest thing that I think I had done up to that point. Also, being a single mom of 2 felt daunting. It felt scary. At the same time, there was a sense of independence and resilience that I knew I was capable of, but I just hadn't ever done it before. Right now, 40 to 50% of marriages in the US end in divorce. That's awful, right? 1 out of every 2 marriages end in divorce. Second marriages have an even higher rate of divorce, hitting 60 to 67%. So it makes a successful remarriage a powerful story. Fortunately, I have a very powerful story in a very successful remarriage, which happened rather quickly and unexpectedly after the divorce. And I moved past all that pain. Even though I was drenched in it, I came up with a better idea of who I am and what I wanted in life. And once I got clear, almost unexpected, well, very unexpectedly, there was a relationship that was budding relationship that I didn't think was probably healthy. But after doing our due diligence, we found out it probably is. And so here we are almost 40 years later. I would say that we have a very strong and getting stronger every day second marriage. But divorce was hard and single parenting was hard. The second thing that happened is that I continued to grow our family. I took our 2 children with me into that marriage. We had 2 more and decided that we really didn't feel complete. So we got pregnant and were so excited to welcome that 5th child. But 13 weeks into that pregnancy, we discovered it wasn't viable and they expected a miscarriage. And the grief of a pregnancy loss is very different. And it's often really minimized by other people, like you just went in and had your toenails cut or something. And it's hard because you've bonded with a baby. That baby was in your heart. And just because it never took its first breath doesn't mean that you grieve less. And so we're going to talk about what that was like for me of losing that child. We went on to have another successful pregnancy, and we had our 5th and last child, another boy, and I finally felt my family was complete. Yes, it took 5. I wanted a large family. I thought I would have 6, and in some ways I felt I did, but I currently have 5 beautiful grown-up babies. That was a good part of it, right? So my third one, shortly after having my last child, about 6 to 8 months later, I got a call and I heard my oldest brother's voice asking me if I was sitting down, and it sounded serious. And I just said, just tell me, just tell me. And I really thought that I would hear that one of our parents had died. Instead, he told me that our brother, Andy, had died. I didn't expect that. I had 3 older brothers. He was the youngest of the 3. I probably was closest to him because we talked every week. Every Tuesday morning at 7:30, he called and we checked in and we talked to each other. Not only had he died, I learned that he took his own life. And I had just been to stay with him 3 weeks earlier and saw no clue of that occurrence. Suicide rates are highest among middle-aged men, 45 to 64. And when you lose someone to suicide, it increases the survivor's risk of mental health struggles, including like grief and depression, and how we manage to walk through that. A few episodes ago, we did a 3-part series where our guest, Dawn Laura, actually walked us through the experience of struggling with her child's mental health and getting him to a place where he could thrive and surviving attempted suicides, not just once, but twice, and then having him successfully commit suicide. And she had such courage and was so articulate about what that was like. And part of me didn't want to take away from her story. That was her story in that episode. If you missed it, it would be worth circling back and listening to it. I didn't want to add my story to that, but part of the letting my heart be seen called me to be in integrity to say, yes, me too. Losing someone you love to suicide, no matter what that relationship is a very, very different grief and difficult grief. And a lot of people really don't know what to say. And most of what people say, to be honest, wasn't helpful. And Dawn especially articulated that in her 3rd episode about things that really helped her and then the things that didn't. So we're going to talk about what I did to process whatever the emotions were. There might be guilt or unanswered questions that follow someone's suicide, but also how do we keep the memory alive? I remember it being so important to me that we remembered him for the whole life he lived up to that point and not just how he died. I didn't want that to be his only legacy. And he made sure it wasn't. And we're going to talk more about that on one of our upcoming episodes. So another very hard and difficult thing was learning how to parent my parents and Bob's mom. As they grew into their 80s and got more vulnerable, learning how to protect them was a whole big learning curve. For my parents, they moved in with us. We found a home where we could have an in-law suite for them. And I was very, very close to both of my parents, and it was a pleasure when they moved in with us. And for 7 wonderful years, we had so many memories with all of my kids being close to their grandparents. It was bittersweet because their presence in our life was big, which made the loss harder to get through. I remember when I was little thinking, I love my mom and dad so much, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to walk this earth when they're no longer a part of it. So those were hard lessons for me. My dad died first. He had prostate cancer, which left my mom here with us. And they were married 68 years, I think, something really like crazy. So their love story, their beautiful life together, they were always walking hand in hand, a good role model for what a healthy relationship looks like, at least in my eyes. For her to walk solo was hard. It was hard to watch her I saw her be brave. I saw her try to reinvent herself and how she spent her time when she no longer had someone to share life with, like my dad. And I also saw vulnerabilities like coming downstairs and having her be on the phone holding her credit card and giving the information to someone on the other end, only to hang up just before getting scammed. Our elderly, the people left on their own in a world that is hardly recognizable to them. They're used to trusting, they're used to a gentleman's handshake being real, and learning how you can protect them from society. Sadly, we have to learn. There are people in our world doing things that are unthinkable. They're finding ways to contact you and tell you that your computer's compromised, therefore all your financial accounts are compromised, and you have to follow their direction. And they have sophisticated ways that when you dial a number, it goes to a different number that sounds like it's legitimate. And it makes me shudder to think, I don't know that I want to be a part of a world that can be so devious, but here we are, right? Thankfully, it's not the norm, but I have two people real close to me that are intelligent and financially savvy people who have been scammed. And I'm just sort of waiting in line for when it's going to happen to me, but I don't want to put that out there. So we're going to tell the universe that I don't need to learn that lesson. However, if you have parents that are entering into the later years of their life, please put things in place to protect them. We also don't like to admit that elder abuse is a real thing. And it's not just the elder abuse of nursing homes or assisted living homes. It's elder abuse by family members. It's in the form of subtle ways where it's usually they get exploited financially. As a matter of fact, the financial exploitation, it's the most common form of abuse. It costs our seniors an estimated $2.6 billion annually of where they've been exploited financially. And 60% of elder abuse cases involve family members. We unfortunately had some experience with that. And I'm going to share some of the things that we found and learned to do and what happened with all that. But how do you recognize those things? And also, what do you do once you do see it? And when do you know that it's time to put them in assisted living? And are they safe there? And do they need to be in memory care? Or when do you take the keys away because they're not driving safely anymore? Keeping them in a sense of independence, but keeping them safe is a very, very long tightrope. And so learning the boundaries and safeguards that you can put in place and how to protect their dignity. And one, if it's you being tempted to exploit, to say no to that, but also being willing to stand up if some other family member is exploiting that person who just can't defend themselves. So that's a big one. All right. The next big thing was when my dad did become terminally ill. His doctor told him to go home and get his house in order, that he had about 6 months to live. I want to talk about this because we were blessed to be able to keep my dad here at home, and all of us were his caregivers. My mom took the lead. We were backup. About 60% of Americans will care for a terminally ill family member at some point. Hospice is a great resource that many people don't like because hospice implies end of life, and it feels a little bit like it's going to take away any hope. Denial can set in when someone's terminally ill, and all we want to do is hold on to the hope that they're going to be the exception. Facing the reality of death is not something we do naturally, but when you do, there are so many blessings and gifts to discover. My dad taught me more. He lived an additional 3 months from what the doctor predicted. So in those 9 months of caring for him, he taught me more in those 9 months than the rest of my life combined. There were treasures, moments I treasure forever, things that we talked about, learning about what he feared, learning about his faith. So many profound and wise, caring conversations took place because I had faced the reality that this was the end for him. And it was something I've feared probably my whole life. So that's going to be a big episode coming up. Next one, number 6, is what to do when you have to care for a parent or loved one who has dementia or Alzheimer's. 6.7 million Americans 65 years and older are living with Alzheimer's. 2/3 of dementia caregivers are women, and 30 to 40% of them experience severe depression or burnout. I think it is by far one of the hardest journeys to take with someone you care about, because they're here, but they're gone. You know them, but they stop knowing you. Pieces of their being and memory store. You know, you want to ask a question and they don't know the answer anymore. That's a hard journey. And if you're in it now, tune in to that episode. We'll talk, we'll listen to each other. I honestly think that when I think about the decisions I had to make when I could no longer be the one to take care of my mom because I couldn't keep her safe, made me sick to my stomach. It felt like trauma. And I knew I had to make decisions. I knew I had to push forward and get her to a place where she was safe. And then when I got her there, I went through my own grief. She was a mile away from our house. I could get there in less than 5 minutes, but I didn't feel good about where she was. And I thought it was because she wasn't here with me anymore. And it took a while for me to realize that the care that she needed was being neglected in this place. And it was a nice looking place on the outside. And I'm sure that for most people, it was a good place. But for my mom, it wasn't. I also had an aunt suffering from Alzheimer's who's 10 years younger than my mom. And she lived close to where my mom grew up. So when I would go visit her, I never felt the feelings I had when I visited my mom here in the different facilities. So we decided to move her in with her sister, her little sister, where she would be closer to where she grew up, which was in Pittsburgh. And if you are listening and you know anyone from Pittsburgh, they have their own dialect. And so all the caregivers sounded like they were from Pittsburgh. And it just brought my mom joy to feel at home with them. And she belonged there. And getting her to where she belonged and not where I wanted her was a hard decision, but it was the right one. So that was hard. She was in memory care a total of 2 years before she fell. She broke her leg. She had to have surgery. I argued with them about the anesthesia and different alternatives to doing what they needed to do through nerve blocks and just light anesthesia, not general anesthesia that they would typically use, because that affects someone with Alzheimer's who can't remember some of the basic things you do to live. She did have the surgery. She woke up long enough to taste some raspberry sorbet, and then she went into a state of unresponsive. I was able to get there. Bob was able to get there, and we sat together. I sat with her a whole day, just her and me. She was unconscious, but I felt her. I held her hand. I thanked her. I did a thing we do that's a blessing of the body. I thanked the hands that held me, the womb that carried me and my brothers, her long legs that still looked rocket style at the age of 94, the feet that helped her walk probably 10,000 miles in her lifetime, probably more. I'm underestimating. She was a walker. Her heart, that was always compassionate and caring and giving, unless you were doing something wrong and you were one of my brothers. They experienced a different side of her, but the rest of us knew that she was outspoken when she wanted to be, but mostly she was the one that was showing up when somebody needed care. Losing that last parent is also a different kind of grief. I had a sense of identity. Like, I don't know, I just am no longer a child of someone because they left. I didn't have a parent. And so there was a very different identity shift for me. And I felt like I went from a little girl to an old grandma at the death of my last parent, my mom, because now I was the elder of the family. And that statement, that elder of the family, just felt old. And I never felt old before. So there were some experiences that I went through and that you might relate to. And then just ways of preserving family legacies, family stories, the memories that you want passed down, that right now your kids are too busy to listen to and your grandchildren are too young to know that they have questions. So being able to document family history and family stories is one day going to be more important than maybe it is right now. Leads me up to number 8, what I started facing prior to that, these kind of all overlap in a decade, is learning about mood disorders, substance use, and how some misdiagnosis of mental health impacts everyone in the family, particularly addiction. We have one of my children struggled with an opiate addiction, got into the opioid crisis, spent 17 years in recovery and relapse, the cycle of recovery and relapse. For a mom, the hope and the despair. It was brutal. I could probably say some of the things I found myself in that journey with my son were some of the hardest moments of my life because it was so far from something I ever expected to be in. I never expected to be relieved when my child was put in jail because then he wouldn't die on the street. I never expected to say, I can't let you come in our home anymore. I never expected to have to say and do the hard things and do it with love so that every time my child parted from my presence or from a phone call or from a text message, he knew I loved him. He knew I was praying multiple times a day for him to stay alive, for angels to interrupt anything that was detrimental. I was on my knees in prayer so often, and we're going to dive deep into this because most people, if it's not them, they know someone whose child or brother or spouse or parent suffered from the opioid addiction and how it impacts the rest of the family. And I'm going to go into that because it did. We also encountered mood disorders, some substance use from siblings that manifested it with anger, with manic highs and lows, the helplessness we all felt in that was also enormous. Learning that bipolar disorder, 60% of individuals with bipolar disorder are initially misdiagnosed. And substance use disorder is common when there is bipolar or mood regulation issues. They co-occur with substance abuse at a rate of 40 to 70%. So people that use synthetic cannabinoids, it can exacerbate a mood instability. And as we are I'm not getting into a political conversation on this, but when people say weed is harmless, when people say it's just synthetic cannabinoid, it's not going to hurt you. It's not illegal even, I think, in some states. While for most of the population, or I want to say most of the population, it is harmless. It is actually helpful for people who are in pain or suffering. They use it in cancer treatment to help them cope. There's a lot of good that comes from it. But please understand that when you offer that to someone and they have a mood instability that's going on, you can open that wide open, and it can be very scary when they have uncontrolled emotions. And so we're going to learn a lot about that in that particular one. I overlapped that last one with the opioid crisis, but that's what my number 9 is. So 1 is about substance use in general and other mental health disorders. But then when you're dealing with addiction and the opioid crisis in particular, it's a whole big ball of wax. And so we're going to be talking about both and how they overlap. Number 10, estrangement from family members. 27% of Americans are estranged from a family member, and adult children are the most common initiators of estrangement from their parents. This is another one that I have to say I never saw coming. I was so close to my parents. My parents were so close to their siblings. They took care of their siblings. Their siblings took care of us. I grew up so close to my aunts and my uncles. Family was everything. And when things got hard, like when my brother took his life, people showed up. When my cousin died unexpectedly from a liver disease, our family showed up. We took care of each other. When my other cousin passed away from swine flu back in the day, we all showed up. Our families came together in grief, and we stay clinging on to each other because it matters. It matters. We need each other. So for me to have 5 children and to be able to say to you, 2 of them right now are estranged, I would have never seen that coming. Coping with that, I would say, is the hardest thing until you ask me about coping with my son, who I didn't know if he was dead or alive for days and weeks at a time, or coping with the loss of my father, or coping with the care of my mom through Alzheimer's. All those things were hard things, right? Estrangement, I just never saw it coming. And I had to work hard through so many of the same grief cycle as if there was a loss, as in death. But losing someone who's not dead, but because they chose to walk out of your life for good, at least at 13 years and counting, is a hard one. It's hard for the mom blame to go into full force, to look at everything I did wrong, to see all the mistakes that I made as a mom, to see all the ways that I was trying so hard to take care of so many people that I couldn't get to everyone, and forgiving myself for that. Motherhood has probably been one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I didn't get it right. I didn't get it right based on results. So estrangement from my family, not having my family be there for each other, to be there for me, is a hard one. It's a hard pill to swallow. Number 11, narcissism. You may or may not know someone who is in the grip of a narcissist, but it is a very growing, just like a pandemic. I have done a lot of research on this and talked to a lot of people about this. I was actually accused of being narcissistic. So I went to my therapist and said, I need help. I'm a narcissist. Please tell me how to not be that way. I don't want to be that way. And my therapist kind of laughed and said, why do you think that? And I said, because somebody told me that. And she laughed again and said, first of all, narcissists rarely go to a therapist and ask for help. They don't think they need it. And so if they do go, they're there to manipulate a situation, and rarely do they stay in the therapist's office. As everything starts to get hard for them, they will find a reason to walk away. And I like going to therapy. I like exploring all the dark shadows inside of me. I want to know all of the things that I don't see about myself so that I can be a better human. That is part of my conviction in this lifetime. So, narcissistic personality disorder impacts 1% of the population. And they say that many, many more exhibit the traits without actually having it, which means that they might have learned them from the 1% that actually have it. People in relationships with the narcissist often experience gaslighting, emotional manipulation, alienation, and self-doubt. I want to hone in on alienation. When our family experienced this, it was through one of my children dating someone who began alienating him from his friends, alienating him from his routine, alienating him from his parents, alienating him from his siblings, his nephews, and also his dog. Once all that was done, it became estrangement. He's locked in, and we have to ride this out. So narcissism is an important thing to learn so that you see those red flags early on. They're very patient and cunning, and they will position themselves in whatever capacity they need to get what they want. I don't think that they're necessarily horrible, evil people. A lot of the people I've talked to who have a narcissist in their life will be hurt so bad and damaged so badly that that's where they go. They're just heartless and evil. And I think the research actually shows that they carry enormous trauma. They've just been deeply traumatized, and this is how they learn to survive. And knowing that gives me such compassion. I don't even need forgiveness in this scenario. I just need to learn to stay healthy as it plays out, for however long it plays out. Last but not least, we're going to talk about living with chronic physical pain. I had an incident that happened about 5 months ago now, last fall, and I fell from a ladder about 6 or 7 feet up. I don't know how high my feet actually were, but I was on the ladder pretty high up, and the ladder began to slide on the garage floor, which was slick concrete, smooth concrete. And as it fell, I didn't fall off the ladder. I held on to it. But as it came down, the first part of my body to hit was my right heel. And my right toe was under the rung of one of the steps, and my heel was what took the blow of a hard fall. And then the top of my foot was smashed with the rung of the bottom step. And they released me from the hospital, told me to contact an orthopedic surgeon the next morning. 4 days later, saw the surgeon thinking, okay, I broke my ankle or something happened to my toe. I didn't know. I was heavily medicated. I will tell you that from the hospital and going forward. And the surgeon came in and he said, you have experienced a life-altering injury. He said, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's bad. Everyone in the room, my niece, my wonderful niece who lives here and takes care of me, even when I don't need it, meaning when I'm healthy and strong. But this time I needed everyone on board. My wonderful husband and my son, Peter, who lives here also, joined forces with my niece to do wraparound care because I couldn't ever be by myself. The surgery was about 4 or 5 hours. There's a lot of metal in my foot, but the surgeon was optimistic and hopeful because he just was pleased with how the surgery went. And he felt like I would have more mobility than he expected. I think that going in, I would have about 40% loss of the mobility of my foot. After the surgery, I think I have 25 to 30% loss of mobility, which was great. That gives me a lot more to work with. I had to put no weight on this foot for 3 months because there had to be a lot of bone grafts, and I didn't want to mess up what he did because I didn't want to go through it again. So for the next 3 months, I didn't put any weight on it. And only until recent last 4 weeks have I learned to put weight on it, to build trust with my foot, to manage the pain. I've gotten rid of the crutches and the boot and the stair lift and wearing a tennis shoe that's very loosely tied because of the swelling. What happened is that when I was at the point where I expected to be doing much better, I had declined into so much pain that I couldn't sleep at night. Nothing could touch my foot. I had to sleep with it literally up in the air, which I couldn't do. So I stayed awake till 4 a.m. until I was so exhausted that I could tolerate putting it under the sheets. But if anything touched it, it felt like electrical current and sandpaper all at the same time. My surgeon sent me to a pain specialist, and that doctor diagnosed me with something called complex regional pain syndrome, which happens through trauma and injury. And my central nervous system misfires. It sends off so many pain signals to my brain, and my brain goes into a big reaction about it. It's very fascinating. It's physical, but it's also mental. It's also a nervous system response. And I want to talk a lot in this episode about our nervous system. And I do trauma-informed coaching, so I'm very aware of how our nervous system plays a role. I'm very aware of the trauma that I have absorbed through all of these 12 things that I've told you, and you can't even imagine how many underneath or within each of those 12 things, how I experienced trauma. Sometimes moments and sometimes weeks of trauma. And there's so many stories and so many hard things that even talking about it just makes me just shake my head. Like, what was I thinking? What was I doing? You guys, I no sooner got through putting out one fire, another started. There was no time for me to really, truly give myself what I needed, enough space in my life to heal. No longer had I said goodbye to my dad. I was helping my son go through opioid withdrawal and getting him into a facility for rehabilitation. No sooner was he getting out, our business was going through something traumatic. I didn't even talk about that one. I just never had time. I could emotionally and mentally allow myself, with the help of a coach and a therapist and family members and a husband who was wonderful at listening. I know I processed the pain, but I did not release the trauma that was in my nervous system. And I believe that by the time I got to the top step of that ladder and to the time that I fell in a short split second, it was life-altering in that I had to sit still and do nothing for 3 months. And I had to think about, how was I going to release the trauma? How does our body, physical body, our nervous system respond to emotional and mental processes? It's fascinating. It's new for me. And I knew right then that I had to start unpacking all the trauma. I had to do that. And that is very different than cognitive behavioral therapy. It's very different than mainstream coaching. The tools for trauma are very different and very sophisticated. We talked with Grace Scarborough. If you haven't listened to those episodes, please go back and do so, because somatic experience is a wonderful way to do that. There's other ways of brain spotting. There's EMDR. There's all kinds of ways to have you release that trauma from your nervous system. And if you don't, you're going to have a nervous breakdown. One day, your nervous system is going to say, no more. Mine came in the form of complex regional pain syndrome. It's a physical manifestation of that trauma. My foot cannot detect temperature. I think it's freezing. And I ask for somebody to give me some socks, and they'll say, your foot is so hot, I can't even hardly touch it. And it felt like it was in an ice cube to me. If you touched it with a piece of velvet, I thought you were cutting me with a knife. It could not understand, or my brain could not interpret the signals correctly. So the process of healing that is a very, very fascinating process, and I'm still in that process, but very aware that my life has to drastically change, that my life has to have room for me in it. In 2023, I worked so hard and passionately on so many projects at the same time that the people around me were going, what is she doing? I started this podcast. I had no idea how to do a podcast. I taught an energy healing course that covered over the course of 1 year. I was coaching. My coaching calendar and my capacity on my calendar was full. I was doing retreats. I was doing so much. I can't even remember. Sometimes I look at it, I think I took another certification course, and it's like, why? What was I doing? I literally put my treadmill on high and began running hard and fast. And I thought that at the end of that year, there would be some result that was so magnificent, it would have all made it better, you know? And I got there and nothing had changed. I had done nothing really to make any of my goals be magnificent. Sure, we had coaching breakthroughs. Sure, the retreats were powerful. Yes, the energy healing course was fun and exciting and exhausting because it was so much for all of us, but it brought a community together that I cherished and needed in my life. But I think I was running. I think 2023 was me running from my entire adult life of every hard thing that I had to do until it made me sick. My immune system was compromised, and I didn't make it through 2024 without my big last hard thing to get through. And I'm still in it here in 2025. So those are my hard things. Those are the things that physical reflection is hard. Relational things are hard. Personal challenges, personal mental health is hard. Loving people who struggle is hard. Losing people you love is hard. They're all hard. 52 card pickup, right? And I think that when even the people in my close circle who even know what I have going on saw through my facade, they saw through to my heart and wondered when I would let it be seen. And this is a podcast, but I'm letting my heart be heard by taking you into some of the most vulnerable painful places in my heart because I want you to have permission to go into the most vulnerable and painful parts of yours. And together we can discover how beautiful it is when we get through the darkness. There's gifts there waiting. It's a matter of how we think about it, how we heal from it, what we release through the trauma, and what we hold on to through the wisdom. It all matters, and it's all happening just so we can thrive and grab the gift of it. It's not like it was a gift that it happened, but out of what happened, there is always a gift waiting if we do our work. Life rarely goes the way that we plan. Never in a million years would I have expected to have so many hard things out in front of me. Divorce, loss, addiction, grief, unexpected twists and turns of caregiving or living with chronic pain. They all leave their mark, but they don't have to leave us broken. Yes, they can shape us, they can refine us, and even reveal the parts of ourselves that we never knew existed. I have to say, I never knew I could be so brave. I never knew I could love so deep. I never knew I could stand so courageously in the middle of a fire. I found and discovered parts of myself I didn't even know existed, and frankly would have never known had I not experienced some of these hardships. So in this series, we're not here to dwell on the darkness. We're here to discover the light that comes afterwards, the resilience, the wisdom, and the unexpected beauty that hardship can reveal. So I invite you to journey alongside of me. Press follow so that you don't miss an episode. And together we're going to explore real stories, honest conversations, and very practical insights on how to transform life's most difficult moments into profound personal growth. Because while pain is inevitable, how we rise from it, well, that is where the real story begins. I hope you'll follow along. I hope you'll contact me with your story. And if you have a story that I'm not covering and you would like to come on as a guest, let me know, because I know that you're not alone. I know that each one of us experiences something that would help someone else. The responsibility that I feel is that I want to be able to light the path to those not yet experiencing it. I want to be the light at the end of the tunnel, or the light that guides you through the very scary, dark forest of the unknown when you find yourself there. Someone that reminds you of your strength and your perseverance and your ability to make it through. Because believe you me, there were many days where I wasn't sure that I would make it. Thanks for listening. I hope I will hear from you, and I hope that I will have you travel along in this very vulnerable and powerful series where I am going to be as transparent as I have ever been. And it's all real life. And it's all offered and presented with so much love. Oh, and hey, I want to ask you to do me a huge favor. I want this podcast to reach far and wide as it can, to help people who need support or need to know they're not alone or learn a new perspective. And I only can do that with your help. You are the way that this podcast grows. You are the way that this podcast lands on the heart of someone who can relate to the real life stories that I'm sharing. And the way that you can help is, one, write a little testimonial. If something has touched you in any of the episodes, be sure that you like it, give it a good rating and thumbs up. Most of all, sharing it. Share it on social media, share it with someone specifically, just copy the link and send it to them in a text and ask them to pay it forward. I really want to reach so many people. I feel like it's how many hearts can I touch with Love, Jenny? That's my hope and wish. And I can't do that. Actually, probably could. I could probably find ways to manipulate the way that we grow on social media. But what I really want is an authentic spread of love. And that is if this matters to you, if this touches you in any way, if this made a difference for you, please share it. Please tell me what you would like for me to cover on a topic of real life stories that went from tragedy to your own personal triumph. So let me hear from you. Give me a good thumbs up or whatever it looks like. Write a testimonial if you want. And also get a coach. Get someone that's going to walk with you through these hardest moments of your life, whether they're behind you and you still need to heal from them, or they're right there on your doorstep, or you are just anticipating them. It's a matter of time. I'm here. I would love to take on a good, heartfelt candidate in my coaching program. The women and the men that I coach know that if they are with me, they are doing their soul work. They are doing their heart and soul. They know how to dig deep, deep, deep and find the pearl and the treasure. And if they don't, they come back and we keep digging deep, deep, deep. So if you are somebody who values personal growth, if you're someone who values finding ways to use the hard parts of life to become better humans, then you would be a candidate for the kind of people that I like to coach. And I've got a few spots open on my calendar. I'd love to have you join me. Just reach out, send me an email, and we'll chat. All right, that was it for my ask, my call to action. Share this with someone you care about and follow my series. And please let me know that you're along for the ride. I love hearing from you. Okay, thanks so much. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you found a spark of wisdom to carry with you, and maybe even a deeper invitation to heal and grow and transform through your own beautiful story. Or maybe this episode made you think of someone who could use encouragement. And if so, I hope you will share it with them. If you'd like to learn more about working with me or attending one of my healing retreats, coaching programs, and other offerings, you can visit my website at jennyaiello.com or email me directly at jenny@jaiello.com. You'll find all the links in the show notes. If today's episode touched you, it would mean the world if you would leave a review or share it with someone who might need it, or just reach out and let me know how it landed for you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm building something special here. Real stories, real life, real connection. One episode, one heart, and one story at a time. As always, with love. Oh, and this is the legal message, but mostly a message from my heart. And I just need to share this with you right now. Please know this podcast is offered solely for educational and entertainment purposes. If you find yourself triggered due to anything that was shared in this podcast, please seek professional help. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for mental health services. While I am a professional life coach, I am not a psychotherapist, nor am I a mental health clinician. So if you are struggling emotionally, please seek help, because you matter, you are important, and most of all, you are worthy of doing this work, the work that leads you to a better and healthier place. Okay? All right. Thank you. And please always make enough time to take care of yourself, and do so with love.